Great. And I'm not really going to read this to you all, but basically BOSCA represents 26 water agencies, cities, water districts, companies, Stanford. We all purchase water from San Francisco, the San Francisco Regional Water System, and BOSCA member agencies provide 1.8 million people provide water to 1.8 million people. It's funny because I'm not used to doing this, looking at this and doing this. Anyways, the goal is to provide high quality supply of water at a fair price. And of course, the object of this program, these landscape classes, is to try and save water, in outdoor spaces. Of course, us water agencies for many years have been saving water indoors. We've done a great job at that, and we really are reaching out to, trying to get that water savings outdoors, because it does represent a huge amount of water. About 50% of our water does go to our outdoor spaces. So BOSCA and the participating water agencies have several programs that you can participate to, help you get that water savings outdoors. The Lawn Be Gone program is one of them. Depending upon the water agency, you can get $1 to $4 per square foot for every foot of lawn that you replace. And you do have to convert your irrigation from a spray irrigation system to a drip irrigation system as well. We offer a $100 rebate for rain barrels. And then we have a brand new program, which we're really excited about, which is the Smart Controller Rebate and Installation Program. So you just go to the boscarachio.com, put in your account number and your name, and they'll give you an instant rebate right there and mail you the Smart Controller. And it's great because you don't have to think much about changing your irrigation scheduling. We suggest quarterly changing it, and so this does it for you automatically based on the weather. So it's really a nice product. And then I think there was one more.
Sorry.
That's okay. Oh, this is a new program, new revamped landscape program. Includes additional rebates for stormwater retention features. So anyways, that's it. And we have one more webinar set up, and that's for natural pest deterrent, and that's June 13th. Oh, there's more. I guess I should have gotten these slides before.
This is the last one. This is the last one.
Okay, great. And then, of course, we have our Waterwise Gardening in the Bay Area. You could just go to the BOSCA website, and there's a great tutorial here. You can click on the different plants, and I'll tell you what the water use is for that plant material. And there's lots of great pictures, give you good ideas on what you can do in your own landscape.
Yeah, this is an awesome website that I actually promote often in my programs because a lot of people aren't aware of it, but there's just a wealth of information, an amazing library of plants that are they adapt to our Bay Area climates, and it's just fantastic. So I like to always give this website a little plug. All right, so that was it. So Amy, let me see if I can. Okay, so if you are able to, wait, hold on.
I have to unmute her.
Okay, sorry. No. Okay, so Amy, I've stopped screen share. You can screen share now.
Okay.
Can
you hear me?
Yep, we sure can.
Hear you.
Okay, I don't see where I can screen share myself. So if someone can do that for me, that'd be great. If not, I can just kind of talk through what I'm doing. Basically, my name is Amy Talbot. I work for the Regional Water Authority. It's a similar organization to BOSCA, but it's set up in the Sacramento region. And we cover a 5-county area, about 2 million people. And like BOSCA, we are also doing a number of programs to help promote efficient watering, especially in the summertime, where at least half of our water is used outdoors. And in the summer peak time, up to 70% of our water is used outdoors. So we have a number of programs that can help folks get to that efficient watering place in the summertime. And like Bosco, we're also promoting the Ratio Controller program. It's a very similar setup to the website. You go on the Ratio site that is all funneled through our main site, which is bewatersmart.info. And right on the front page, you can go to the Ratio Controller program and enter your information, see if you're eligible, and you get a Ratio Controller for $75 plus tax. That's one of the programs we're running. We have numerous rebate programs as well. And due to the COVID-19 situation, our agencies are taking their WaterWise house calls virtual. And so they're walking customers through indoor and outdoor savings and assessments. We also have a sprinkler scheduler. So this is if you don't have a smart controller, you can go to our online source, which is also on bewatersmart.info at the top right part of the website, and put in your local watering information, and it will create a custom sprinkler schedule for you that you can follow throughout the year. And we also have a plant directory if you want to figure out what kind of plants you want to put in your yard, and they're categorized by native, by low water use, kind of everything you would want to find. And again, that's on our website, bewatersmart.info. And lastly, one of our newest resources is a nursery guide for those nurseries that are offering curbside pickup and also online ordering for supplies to help you revamp your yard this summer. So for allowing me to promote what we're doing in the Sacramento region, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Just to clarify, your irrigation scheduling, is that just for the Sacramento area?
Yes, it is, but I believe it's done by zip code. Mm-hmm. And it was designed by a woman from the Bay Area. So I'm not sure if it's applicable in that area, but I know the one that yes, of course. Everyone knows Lori.
It's Lori.
We were just talking
I'm not
about
sure.
Her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
So she's the one who designed the app for us, and so I believe that it's applicable in the Bay, but I'm not sure. And it is done by zip code.
Great. There's a question that maybe Debbie and or Amy you could answer. Jennifer's asking if we can post the URLs for the resources that you were just mentioning. And if Amy, do you have any more to add? If you're done, should I get my program back on, or no rush?
Yes, I think you can get your program back on, and all the resources I just mentioned are all linked into our main website, and it's bewatersmart.info. So whoever is asking the question should be able just to go there and find everything I was mentioning.
Okay, it's bewatersmart.info.
That's right.
Okay, great. Okay, here we go. All right.
Do you want to take one question before? I might be able to answer it as well. You get started.
It's that was Jennifer's question. Would you please post the URLs?
Okay, I had one more from Gina.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She wants to know if the Barrier Gardening site tells you which plants are deer resistant. And if I remember correctly, I don't believe so. I don't think there is any.
Okay.
So I'll let you take over.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate all of that great information you just had to share with us. Thanks, everyone who's joining us this evening. I really appreciate it. We're going to talk about summer landscaping essentials and keeping your garden happy and healthy throughout the summer months. I'm Suzanne Bontempo. I am the program manager for Our Water, Our World, another Bay Area program that brings awareness between pesticides and water quality, but I'm also a garden educator, integrated pest management educator. So I'm going to dive into a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but I'm going to try to keep it really brief. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me at any time. And again, this is being recorded. So I just want you to know that I am here to support you in any way I can. So, keeping your garden healthy and happy throughout the summer. How do we accomplish this? Well, we're going to learn about how we maintain a healthy garden throughout the summer months, how to adjust your irrigation schedule for our longer daylight hours, and then keeping up with some of the common pest problems that we see. So, maintaining a healthy garden. What does that look like? Well, I'm assuming, or I'm going to assume that everyone has already planted their plants. But in the event that you have to plant something new, we get new plants throughout the summer months, it's always ideal to plant on cooler days. So that's really when temperatures are no hotter than 80 degrees. If we are in a run where temperatures are really like 85 every single day, then plant that plant at the end of the day when things have cooled off, like about now is perfect. Things have cooled off a little bit. And we're always going to amend the soil with compost. We're going to use organic fertilizers, and we're going to take advantage of mulch. So when I say amend our soils with compost, it's going to be really good quality compost. We can buy it in bulk from a place like Linkso, or we're going to buy it in bags. And when we buy it in bags, sometimes we're not really sure if it's compost because these names can be a little confusing. I'm just here to share that soil conditioner, soil amend, soil, planting mix, planting compost, these are all going to do the same trick. And the main key here is that we want to inoculate our soils with beneficial bacteria and beneficial fungi. These, I like to coin this phrase as being our nutrient transport enhancement systems. When we inoculate our soils with really good quality compost, we could also be making compost at home, that's fair. But what we're doing is we're increasing the microbiology in the soil. And when we do that, we're actually helping the organic materials kind of break down. We're going to break down toxins and pollutants. We're going to allow soil water holding capacity. Also, we're going to allow for more soil nutrients to be readily available for those plants. And it's also going to hold the soil together and increase the structure of the soil. So no matter what, if you've got sandy soil or hard clay soil, adding compost to the soil, good quality compost, is going to inoculate the soils with microbiology and then also improve the structure. We're going to work with organic fertilizers. Now, these are going to be just samples of some organic fertilizers we'll see in the store. Now, these are what I consider dry fertilizers. They're going to look more like a meal or like crushed oatmeal. Again, I typically am using these at the time of planting my plants, and then I will apply these seasonally or maybe annually, and that would be to establish trees and shrubs and perennials. So what I mean by that would be like my fruit trees, my roses, and anything else like maybe my dahlias when they're starting to come up that time of year when we'd want to fertilize it. I'd work this into the top couple inches of the soil around the drip line of the tree. But what I really want to talk to you about, and I guess let me just back up a second. And the reason why organic fertilizers are so important is because we're actually feeding the soil microorganisms, which then are going to have the symbiotic relationship with the root systems of our plants. When we have healthy soil, healthy roots, healthy plant, those plants are going to be able to withstand stresses such as all of a sudden super hot days, those heat stresses, and stresses from any type of insect or disease that might pop up. And they're going to be less likely to be affected by diseases and pest problems. So wanted to share that. But what I really am wanting to share with you, because I kind of needed to back up and share all those other things first, is I wanted to introduce you to the liquid fertilizers. And I want to talk to you about why these are so important. So again, this is just a sample of different brands that you'll see. But essentially, I am really taking advantage of the growing season with liquid fertilizers. And what I do is I'm going to, throughout the growing season, be it my roses, be it my vegetables, any of my food crops, I'm going to mix up a watering can per the application instructions on the label, and I'm going to apply liquid fertilizer to my throughout my garden, whatever I feel like needs a little extra boost. Especially my food crops, because those crops are working really hard to give me food. So I want to give them food as well. And it's a really great way to get good quality food to your plants in a way without disrupting root systems. And then we want to take advantage of mulch. Now, I think we're all really familiar with, there's a lot of different types of mulches out there. There's colored mulches. Understand that those are dyed with a food-based dye, so they're not going to be toxic. The types of mulches I like are going to be the chunkier arbor mulches, which you see in this picture here. This is going to be the mulch that I'm getting from a tree tripper when like tree guys come and like chip up some limbs that they've cut from a tree on your property or your neighbor's property. Or I like to, and they sell this type of mulch at a place like Linkso, any landscape supply. Or I would recommend working with a type of mulch that's going to kind of mat down well and kind of hold together, such as shredded cedar. So a shredded cedar mulch is going to be really nice too. The reason why I like these types of mulches that kind of hold together is because when we water, they don't float up and kind of wash away. So I think some of us may be familiar with that kind of experience. I certainly have been. So I've learned to kind of work with these chunkier, coarser mulches. Another benefit of these chunkier, coarser mulches is that they are going to decompose a little bit more slowly because I've got bigger pieces. But the benefit of them decomposing is that they're actually feeding the soil. We are aware that by laying down a nice layer of mulch on the soil is actually going to protect the soil, keep it cool in the summer and warm in the winter, and actually reduce the water evaporation rate significantly. And it actually also creates habitat for our beneficial insects, which is really nice. Okay, a couple tips about maintaining or maintenance around the garden. So these are a couple of things that I like to share. Is we want to do some summer pruning. So summer pruning, a couple things for those of you that are growing cherries or apricots. Some of us are not aware, I come up with this question a lot, that cherries and apricots are actually trees that need to be pruned after we've harvested those fruits. So they're going to get pruned probably July or August once we've finished harvesting those trees. If you would like some more information on any fruit tree you have in your garden, then you can check out the Dave Wilson Nursery website. It's a wealth of information. It's wonderful, but I just wanted to remind folks that if you've got cherries and apricots, they are summer pruned right after we've harvested them. And then for our perennials, for our roses, for any of our other flowering plants, when we want to extend the flower season, it's nice to go through and deadhead those flowers, cut off any of the dead stalks, cut off of any of the dead flowers, so that we can extend that flowering period. And I typically will, good rule of thumb is just to go down the stem until there's a cluster of leaves. Now, flowering plants are very different. They have a lot of different shapes and sizes and structures. So it's going to be a little difficult, but if you can just go down until there's like a little branching or some leaves, that's a good place to prune it. And then lawn care. I know that some of us still have lawns, so I like to throw this in. There is that nice rebate if you're considering to change your lawn out. Please take advantage of that. However, for those of us that still have a lawn or have something that's green in front or in back of our property that we call a lawn, even though it's mostly weeds, in the summer months, it's a good rule of thumb to mow high. So we want to raise the decks on our mower to be mowing at about 3 inches. The reason why is because we are taking advantage of those blades of grass to actually cast shade on the root system, which is going to reduce the water evaporation rate. It's going to keep those roots a little cooler and keep them moist for a little longer. We're going to let those clippings lie. We're just going to let them lie out there on the lawn, and as they decompose, they're actually feeding that soil really nice nitrogen. We're going to watch out for weeds and hand pull them. And I know that sounds a little daunting for some of us. It's like, oh, there's just so many weeds in our lawn. I can share from personal experience that when you see, I'll do like a weekly or even bi-weekly kind of like, I'll graze through my lawn and just look for weeds and just pull them out with a little weeder. And to be honest, it doesn't take that long. There's even weeding tools for lawns that you can use by standing up if you have a little bit of a sore back or sore knees. And what I'll do is then I'll just grab a cup, like a little handful or so of soil, some nice of that planting mix that I had, that compost. I'll do a little dusting, especially if there's a little bit of a divot there from pulling the weed out. I'll just kind of rake it out so it's a nice flat grade. And then I'll just sprinkle a little handful of grass seeds on top. This is a great way to ensure that you're going to have a nice lush lawn. And then treat for grubs. A lot of us have those experiences where the raccoons come in the fall and like try to dig up the lawn or roll up the lawn. It's because they're going for the larvae of the beetles and other insects that will to have their larval period in the soil, especially around the lawn. So we can treat for grubs, and the best way to treat for grubs and other soil-dwelling larvae is with beneficial nematodes. You can order the beneficial nematodes online, or you can reach out to your local garden center and order them. They're microscopic worm-like organisms that naturally live in the soil, and they feed on soil-dwelling insects. So kind of cool, kind of weird, very effective. And then a couple other tips before we take a pause to answer some of your questions is we want to go through and kind of clean up the garden. We want to harvest the food as it's coming on. And I can share, I already have my summer squash pumping out zucchinis like mad. So it's just the beginning of June and I'm already passing them out to the neighbors. So I just want to share that it's a good rule of thumb to get out there and clean up food that's out there, because when it's staying on the plants for too long, it's going to be a vector for some other problems such as rodents and, you know, inviting other pests. We can also go through and kind of weed between our raised beds, between the vegetable crops, between the flowers. We can prune any broken branches from like larger shrubs and trees. Just if the winds pick up, sometimes a branch or a limb might, you know, break a little bit. So, and then as the fruit comes on, it's a real good rule of thumb to just try to harvest. So what you see is a picture on the right. This is actually closer to November, but this is the end of an apple season. And before we move into the winter, we want to remove all those apples that either just didn't get harvested, they got overlooked because we didn't see them because the leaves were still on the tree, or we just plain got tired of the apples and you just kind of just leave them there. But it's really important to clean up. Sanitation in the garden is key for preventing pest problems and keeping a garden healthy. All right, boy, that was a lot that we just covered in a very short amount of time. So I just like to see, Debbie, do we have any questions that we can take a pause and answer for a moment?
Well, I was talking on mute. The first question is, I'll get this by next year maybe. So the first question was, how thick should the mulch be?
Oh, that's a great question. I love that question because ideally you want to have the mulch to be as thick as possible. 3 inches is great. If you can go thicker, wonderful. Not always the option though. If we have established trees, shrubs, and perennials, oftentimes we can't really bring the thickness of mulch up that high. In my garden, I'm lucky if I have 1 to 2 inches thick. I try to plant my plants slightly high so that over time, I know they're going to slightly settle. But then also I want to be able to take advantage of them being slightly high so I can mulch like heck out along in between the plants. Really want to make sure that we are not bringing mulch up around the crown of the trees, the shrubs, the perennials, because that's going to be a death sentence for our plants. We always want to make sure the crown, that's where the trunk of the plant or the stem of the plant meets the root system. Excuse me, that always wants to be clear. And then we bring mulch out just about 1 inch or so away from the crown, and then we start to really lay it out. So if we can get 2 inches out, I think that's fair. 3 inches is ideal. But like I said, sometimes we don't always have the grade. Now, if we, because then we would be burying our plants almost. Now, if we're on a slope, it's nice to work again with something that's going to be more fibrous, like that cedar, shredded cedar mulch, things like that.
Great. And then I think these two go together. Should we prune a small tree? Our apricot is only a few years old and not very big yet.
Yeah, we have a tendency to be hesitant with our fruit tree pruning. I can share that your fruit tree wants to get pruned. It is going to give you better fruit production, and it is going to grow. So a big mistake that a lot of us make is we wait till the tree gets too big and then we cut it down, and then that tree can't really recover. We're not really able to cut it to the size. So please prune your fruit tree every year. Email me later. I have a really awesome book that I want to recommend about how to prune. It's a fruit tree book. If you're interested, I can throw that out there. It's kind of like the Bible for us in the industry. So yes, so please prune. Yes, please prune your fruit trees.
And the last question is, oh, maybe there's more. How do you know if you have grubs?
Well, you can actually dig around the soil. You can, first you probably want to just do a little internet search so you know what grubs look like, or go to the UCIPM website, UCIPM, and check it out. You can do a search there and become familiar with it. But we just dig around and we can see the grubs in the soil.
I also thought that if you over irrigate, if the soil's really moist, that encourages grubs as well. Is that right?
Well, when we over irrigate or irrigate inappropriately, which is shallow and frequent, similar, we are putting the lawn under stress, and we are inviting pests. Yeah. Okay. That's a big that's a big part that I'm going to touch on briefly when we talk about watering.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, I sure do.
Okay, great. Can you talk more about how much of the compost and fertilizer you should mix in with your soil?
So at the time of planting, kind of depends on how rich your soil is or how crummy your soil is. So let's say it's kind of a crummy area that hasn't had any life. It's fairly lifeless soil. It's kind of dry and very low in nutrients. I would probably try to mix in at a rate of 25% to 50%. Really try to make it as rich as possible. You can also reach out to the folks at Linkso and ask them, depending on where you live, the type of soil you have, they'll be able to guide you a little bit more specifically. And then as far as fertilizer, I typically am spot fertilizing so I'll have a planting hole, like if I'm planting 1 gallon or up, I'll dig that hole, I'll amend that soil, and then I'll apply the dry fertilizer according to the application rate on the bag. It's usually about, let's just say about 1/4 cup. And then I kind of mix that fertilizer into the soil right at the root zone. We always want that dry fertilizer to be right at the root zone. That's where it's going to have the big impact, unlike synthetic fertilizers, which you never would want to do that. So, and then if I'm amending a whole area, so if we're going in and let's just say we're just going to be planting a lot of ground covers or a lot of perennials, then I will be mixing the soil in, I'll be turning it over, and I will be applying the dry fertilizer at the same time. So I might, douse the area with the dry fertilizer according to the rate on the bag, and then put the compost on top and kind of turn it with a fork and or a shovel, and then grate it out. Okay.
There's one more question, but I think you're going to get to this. So.
Okay. All right, let's move on, and we will have another time to ask more questions.
Oh.
Okay, super. Thanks, Debbie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the planting and watering. I like to talk a little bit about this. So here we are, that awesome resource that we showed in the Bosqua slides at the beginning is going to be a great resource for you in regards to planting the right plant in the right place. It's really important for us to plant for our Bay Area gardens. And why is that? Because we here in California live in a Mediterranean climate. That means we have summer dry. We do not get summer thunderstorms, not yet. On a rare occasion we are getting them, but for the most part we're very dry through the summer months, and we typically get our rainfall, in the winter into early spring. So the other thing I want to point out is right plant, right place. We want to understand our sun exposure. It's so important to plant a sun-loving plant in the full sun, or its sun requirements, versus a shade plant really wants to be in the shade. Anything other than that is going to add a lot of stress to the plant. And again, when plants are stressed, they're going to be more prone to get the insects, the pests, the diseases. And then another thing to point out is understand the size of the plant. So this is all the years I worked in garden centers, we all fall in love with plants when we go to garden centers, right? We see them, they look really cool. We fall in love with them. It's something new and different. And it's a little plant in that pot. But it's really important when we see these tags, we want to read the tags and make sure we understand how big that plant's going to get, and make sure we have the space for it, so it doesn't get overgrown, and that we're going to have to do a lot of pruning, because a lot of pruning is also a lot of maintenance for us, but also can encourage insects during a season that would be unnatural for the plant, because insects like to go for the new flush of growth that has all those sugars in it. Also, we want to plant plants with similar water needs together. So this is really important. And understand that, if we have a lawn or we have an area that really likes to be watered, we're not going to put plants such as lavenders around the edge of that, because they're going to also be receiving that high water usage, and that plant is going to be gone in a matter of months, if not years, because they can't handle all that water. So understand the plants that like to get really dried out between watering is going to go in their own area, and the plants that need to have a little extra water can also go in their own area, and this is key. And something I want to share is that when we talk about how much water we need to apply to our landscapes, and how to set up our irrigation systems, it's really important to understand how water moves through the soil. So this is just an illustration I was able to get off the internet, which I think is pretty good, because you're going to see in a minute something I drew, which is not as good. But when we have clay soil, the water is going to pool out a little bit. When we have loamy soil, it's going to kind of absorb at a nice rate, and sandy soil, it kind of goes straight down. There's something to point out about clay soil when we're talking about irrigation and irrigation thresholds, is that, let's say that plant really does need to receive a gallon of water. We have our emitters, and let's say the emitter, the little plug that lets the water that come out and at a rate of 1 gallon per hour. If after 10 minutes that water is no longer able to absorb into the soil, it starts to pool up and maybe even run off or down the garden area, then we know that's the threshold. So we're going to have to understand that we have to stop the irrigation clock at the 10 minutes is as long as it can run. And then we'll set the irrigation clock for another 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes later, and then another 10 minutes, another 30 minutes later. So we're going to pulse the water out, set that clock so that the water can come out in short spurts, little bit of volume over a longer period of time. It's called pulsing. I hope that makes sense. But this is something that is important, because I can't tell you how often I see when I go to a client's house, the water is not even around the plant. It's like running down, you know, it's made a little channel and it's going to some other plants. Okay, this is the picture I drew. Not a 5-year-old, I drew this one, so I apologize. So when it comes to learning how to water, it's not so easy because we don't see what's going on underneath the soil. So that's why the smart controllers are really helpful, okay? They're really gonna help us dial in the appropriate amount of water. But a couple things I wanna point out. The first picture on the left, that's a pop-up sprinkler, or let's also imagine it's hand watering, or like a soaker hose. Roots are only going to go where the water goes. So if we're watering shallowly, roots are just going to grow shallowly. So if we have a hot day out of nowhere, that water is going to evaporate really quickly. That plant could be stressed, even showing signs of wilt by the end of the day. We're going to have to water more frequently. That's not going to be very efficient. The picture in the middle, okay, that black line is supposed to be that PE tubing, the irrigation tubing, and that little purple nub is supposed to be one of those little plugs, those little emitter plugs. Now, this is supposed to illustrate, yes, we have nice deep watering. We're letting the soil dry out a couple inches before we water again, but we forget that as a plant grows, we need to add emitters and pull the emitters out so they're always around the drip line of the tree. That drip line of the tree, imagine the root system is mirroring that plant. What we see above ground, let's just imagine it's mirroring what's below ground. And we always want to focus our water around those root hairs. And also if we're going to fertilize, we're going to focus around the drip line as well, because it's the fibrous little root hairs are what's absorbing the nutrients, absorbing the water. We really want to avoid focusing the water around the crown, because again, that's where we can start getting into problems like crown rot and such. So picture on the far right, this is going to show a nice, deep, even watering. And we're able now to let this plant dry out, the top few inches of the soil to dry out before we water again. This is the plant that's going to be able to handle drought, heat stress, water stress. It can go a number of days without having to get watered again because it's got this nice surplus down at the root zone. So I wanted to share, when we water deeply and less often for plants that are established. You know, understand it could take a year or two for a plant to become established. Through that time, we're coaxing those roots out and, you know, out and down. And of course, annuals is going to be a different ball game with watering. But this is for established perennials, trees, and shrubs. Okay. I'm going to dive into some irrigation maintenance before I take my next break for questions. So this is the time to think about all your water questions. And this is going to be, hopefully, this will not be too complicated. I seem sometimes to get a little bit ahead of myself. So, all right, we have drip systems. I see the irrigation clock photo is a little blurry, I apologize. So irrigation systems are amazing because they are, they allow us just to, you know, schedule the controller and we can just know that things are going to get watered. However, they are not set it and forget it systems. As we move into our summer months, as these daylight hours extend, we're going to want to make sure that we are applying enough water. We also want to make sure that let's say today is Wednesday. I had my irrigation go off this morning. I want to now, let's say again, the next time I have it scheduled is for Friday morning, but I want to go out and make sure, did the soil dry out around that plant before the irrigation is scheduled to go on? Maybe it hasn't dried out yet. So then I'm going to maybe push it to Saturday. Or in the reverse, maybe it's so hot right now that I'm going to have to increase the water. Maybe I'm doing nice deep watering, but it's bone dry by the next day. So there, we want to address that and increase the schedule. A couple things that we can also share is that when we're watering with irrigation systems, we're working with those little emitters and the irrigation tubing. That's in direct contact with the soil, and ideally the mulch is on top of it. So now we've been able to remove the any water evaporation that would immediately happen, like if we've got a soaker hose or a sprinkler system that's above ground. We're going to see less weeds in the garden because we're only watering we're only watering the plants we want to water. We're not watering extra areas. So now we're going to reduce weeds. And the best time to water is actually early in the morning when the soil is still cool and the air temperature is still cool. So those are some tips I want to share. You might not have an irrigation controller. Oh, wait, I see that I have a typo here. I added this at the last minute. These are irrigation controllers that actually are battery operated, that are remote. So we can get these and just hook them up to your hose bib and then have the assembly afterwards, the PE tubing with all of that. And these are kind of cool, especially if you've got a larger property or a property where you can't wire in the controller to go around, or if you have an area of the garden that just didn't make it into that irrigation zoning, that you've kind of developed a new area and you're like, how do I get irrigation to it? These remote battery operated little controllers go right onto the hose bib. They're awesome. If you've got any questions about this, you can check out Ewing, any irrigation supply store in your area, or you can even call the Urban Farmer Store in San Francisco. They're awesome. Okay, I was at the hardware store the other day and I saw that they had these demonstrations on the wall. So I took a picture because I thought it was kind of cool. There's two types of setups. The one on the right is maybe something you might already have in your garden, where it's going to be the valve at the top that allows the water to come out when the clock says, you know, that irrigation controller says, okay, you're going to go on at 6 in the morning for 15 minutes. It's wired to this valve. It's going to go off. There's going to be a pressure regulator, backflow prevention, and a filter. And then we're going to get to that PE tubing. The one on the left, that's more of the hose bib style. And that's where I was talking about those clocks before. We're just going to click the attach that clock right in between where that hose bib and the assembly goes. And it could be after the Y if you want to use the hose function. Anyway, this is just an example. The irrigation emitters. So we've got the one on the left. This is very common. It's most likely, because it's all black, 1 gallon per hour. And then the emitters on the right, this is actually inline tubing. So this is our PE tubing that has the emitters. They're usually spaced about every 12 inches, and they're going to let water come out there. So what happens is, I'm sorry, jumping ahead. See, I told you I would. The other ways to water, we can use soaker hoses, we can use sprinkler systems. I know people always ask, what about them? Sure, these are really great options when we've got irrigation set up So we have our irrigation set up and it's set up perfectly, but then I just added a new plant. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to hand water that plant or put it on a soaker hose or get the sprinkler system set up just for that plant. Or let's say I know I'm going to have a hot week, but I don't want to change my irrigation because I know that it's going to go back and cool down. So I might just do some supplementary watering with the soaker hose or a sprinkler. These are great ways to use these tools without getting involved in your irrigation controller, but also we're going to actually, when we can spot water, we actually can be watering very effectively and efficiently. Okay. But then, okay, this is what I was getting to. Then things happen. So it is not uncommon for irrigation tubing to either we hit it with the shovel because it's buried under that mulch, or a critter eats it. Critters love the irrigation tubing, or anything like we've turned off the irrigation during the winter months before we turn it back on in the spring. Insects get in there and those emitters and like to make their little nests and the little homes. Anything can happen. So it's really important that we actually pay attention. Even me, I was walking my dogs the other morning and this new zone, it was set up, but it wasn't used for a number of years, but I've expanded some vegetable beds. I've had this geyser coming up in the middle of it's kind of a gravelly, weedy parking area. Geyser, I was like, oh heck. I had to go out there, dug it out. Lo and behold, the PE tubing had a slice in it. I have no idea how that happened. And so I, got the flag out, got the shovel out. I was able to come back and fix it later. But my point is that it's really important when we've turned irrigation off and we're turning it back on, there's the end caps. We want to open those end caps up and just flush out the system, put those end caps back on. We want to go through and just listen, look, observe, make sure everybody is getting water. Make sure the areas were watered evenly where we intended them to get watered. And then if we think something's funny, then we're going to have to, investigate a little bit. And these are some, fittings that you might want to have on hand, the goof plugs. These are going to fit either little holes that are in that 1/2-inch tubing or the spaghetti tubing, the 1/4-inch tubing. And then of course the compression fittings on the right, those couplers, which is going to where we can, if we've got a slice in that PE tubing, we cut it and then we connect it together. These are just some good things to have on hand. You don't need to have a lot, but they're going to make your life a lot easier. So I'm hoping I was able just to give you some irrigation maintenance 101 in a matter of 7 minutes, and it wasn't too complicated or overwhelming. So we have some questions.
Yes, and I just wanted to add that one of the things that I find many times when I go out and do an irrigation audit is that folks have really high pressure for their drip systems. Mm-hmm. And so just putting on a pressure reducer helps a lot so that you don't have your emitters popping off. So
yeah. That's I think it's required. I think it's to code that you need to have it, but I'm not sure if the average homeowner would know that. But that's why I like to show that picture of the whole assembly of we have the filter, the pressure regulator, and the backflow prevention, which you don't think of, but it's a little extra piece that really is going to protect you.
Right, your drinking water.
Yeah.
You don't want your irrigation water in your house. Okay. So, and we don't want it back in our water system either. Okay, so let me see, where are we? So this is $1 million question. What is the ideal amount of water the veggie and flower gardens in the summer? What's the ideal amount of water for the veggie and flower gardens in the summer?
This is exactly what Debbie and I were talking at before the program started, because it varies. It's so hard for me to answer that question because let's just say we're going to go back to those resources. What was it? BT Gnome? What was it?
Oh, it's ET.
Oh yeah, ET Water Gnome.
ETWaterGnome.com.
etwatergnome.com, and also the website that Amy mentioned, bewatersmart.info. But I want to share and it also depends on what kind of emitters you have. Like, do you have emitters that are releasing 2 gallons per hour? Or do you have emitters that are releasing 1 gallon per hour? Or are they inline tubing that's a half a gallon per hour? So this is where you could do a couple tests. You might not have any idea. And you can get one of those little deli containers, and you can just put the deli container underneath a few of the emitters, expose those lines, and then just see how much water is coming out. Let's say your irrigation is set for 15 minutes. We can now measure how much water is coming out. And then you can see, is that enough water for that area? Were we able to get a nice deep? We really want to gauge that water and get it down about 6 inches. You know, of course, the water will continue to percolate down, but during the immediate irrigation timing, I always like to gauge and get it down about 5-6 inches. And I want to get it out around where those roots are. As plants become mature, like such as my tomatoes and my summer squash specifically, I'm going to, right now I'm watering every day because they're brand new. It's a very short amount of time. But as they mature, I'm going to start watering every other day for a little longer. And then I'm actually going to get it down to about just twice a week, because those root systems have really extended. Debbie, do you have anything to add?
No, it's very complicated, and there's a lot of, you know, it depends upon the kind of flowers and the kind of vegetables and the maturity level, and, you know, is there a slope, and is it in shade, and it's really complicated to know how much to water without taking into account all of those parameters. I mean, you can use some basics like the scheduling that, you know, a lot of cities offer, but that's usually for just turf or shrub, and it's
in
the middle of the road, and it's the hottest part of the yard, right? So
another thing I can share is that there's the tools I use and the tools I've used for decades, working with clients, working in my own gardens, and teaching people like you guys. I've been doing this for a while. The Sunset Western Garden Book and Pam Pierce's Golden Gate Garden. So even though the Golden Gate Garden seems like it might be only San Francisco, it's for the Greater Bay Area. Pam Pierce and Sunset Western Garden are the 2 books I am referencing on a regular basis now, after being 25 years into this professionally. So those are 2 great books that I would recommend to you, because they're going to help you with your watering schedule. And when we get out there and we feel the soil, again, go back to where the suggestion I had is, after the irrigation has gone off, feel the soil, dig around with the trowel, make sure did I get enough water out there? Maybe not. Maybe I actually need to, instead of 10 minutes, I need to have it go 15 minutes, maybe 20. Oh no, maybe 20 was too much. You know, we want to kind of play with it. And after we kind of like give this attention, like this, our irrigation schedule attention for a couple of weeks, it becomes very intuitive to us. And then we can still monitor, but monitor seasonally. And then it really becomes kind of more of like a very intuitive thing for us to just know, oh, I got to check my irrigation. That's at least been my experience with a lot of people that I work with.
Yeah, it's just a lot of hands-on.
Yeah.
In the beginning, for sure. It
is. And then you really understand. And I'll tell you, from property to property, soil changes, and then that also will change. It's a whole nother part of it's another variable. To respect the people time, I just have a little bit more. I'm going to zip through the rest of my program, and then I'm going to stay on and answer questions if that's okay. I just don't want to get too far for those that have to really leave at the 8 o'clock hour. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, super. Okay, I just want to close by talking a little bit about monitoring for some pests throughout the summer months, because pests come up. First thing is we always want to identify what the pest is, because we can't identify it, we can't solve the problem. That's firsthand. We might think, oh, something's chewing my plants, I need something to kill it. No, that's not how it really works. So pest ID is the most important part, because then from there we understand the life cycle of that pest, because sometimes we might see something chewing our plants, but what it was has been long gone and we're just now noticing. So if we were to try to apply any type of pesticide, and of course it's always going to be eco-friendly, then it would be a waste of time and money if that pest isn't around. We want to understand the pest habitat and the timing of that pest. And then we want to understand what natural enemies would maybe be around taking care of that pest. A lot of times we don't recognize soldier beetles or the lacewing larva or even ladybug larvae, and we think that they might be the pest, but they're actually taking care of the problem for us. So those are just some things I want to throw out there. I want to throw out these 2 websites that are going to be your online resources to help you with pest ID and for pest management. Of course, Our Water, Our World. We've got a library of pest problem solving fact sheets that are under different topics like ants, aphids, yellow jackets. And then also this really awesome resource. It's on the home screen. I don't know if you can see it, but Ask Our Expert. You can click on that, opens up to an email platform, and you can ask any question you have about pests or pesticides. And it goes to Burke, the Biointegral Research Center. It's a team of entomologists and chemists. They'll answer your questions Monday through Friday within 24 hours. And then of course our UCIPM website. And again, the reason why we want to do our research here is because it's for our California climate. And there's an amazing catalog of pests, pest problem solving. There's a weed gallery, there's turf management, there's a watering schedule there that I was trying to get that link, but I was having, it's very specific. So you'll have to do a little bit of diving in on yourself, by yourself. We're going to work with some barriers. So preventing the pests from coming in, like netting your fruit trees to prevent squirrels or birds from getting your fruit, working with row cover to prevent, insects or critters from getting in, working with gopher baskets, barriers for the slugs and snails, but also screens in our windows. We work with traps such as sticky traps, of course, fly traps, yellow jacket traps, gopher traps, other rodent traps, things like that. These are going to be great ways to manage problems and also to monitor if the problem still exists. And then I also like to really go on a little further with exclusion, because I know that squirrels and rats seem to be the biggest problems here in the Bay Area. I talk about this every day. These are just some examples. So these are some different ways you can make exclusion baskets. Rodents, we're going to use 1/4-inch hardware cloth. Hardware cloth is wire mesh we get at the hardware store or home improvement store near the fencing. So hardware cloth is something we don't recognize, but it's just wire mesh. It's galvanized. Rodents cannot chew through it, but yes, 1/4-inch because they can squeeze through 1/2-inch. Birds, if birds are the issue, we're going to use 1/2-inch hardware cloth. If it's squirrels or deer, we can use poultry wire. Or I was at a friend's house and they had this, it used to be a bird feeder that kind of broke, and they put it over their potted plant. I think it's beautiful. So look at different ways how we can prevent the pests from coming in and eating or annihilating our food and flower crops. All right. Yes. We are just about at the end. Actually, let me just go one more time and then we will ask questions. So in close, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Everything is connected. So I just like to invite you to look at your garden through a new lens, see how we can maintain our gardens, clean up the old fruits, the old vegetables, do some summer pruning, do some summer deadheading, invite our beneficial insects, reduce pesticides. All of this is going to help you have a happier, healthier garden that will be more easy for you to maintain. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us. For those of you that have to leave, it's 8:01. I did it. fast and furious, but I
Yeah.
am here. Please, I'm going to continue to answer your questions. I want to thank Redwood City Water and all of your fine folks that are hosting this tonight. But my website's Plant Harmony. I have a newsletter. You can join it. You can email me. I'm here for you. And from there, let's ask some questions.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. Great presentation. So if I amend soil with compost, is it still necessary to use organic fertilizer for general planting beds, not fruit trees?
Yeah, it is, because the compost is not going to have all the nutrients. Now, that's not always true. Sometimes we are making homemade compost and we know it's premium quality because we know what we've added to it. But sadly, a lot of times our commercial compost, they just don't have the facility wherewithal to actually manage it in a way that's going to be as nutrition or nutrient rich as we'd like. So I just like to add that fertilizer at the time of planting, especially when it's going to be our perennials that I want to have a long bloom season, my roses, my vegetables, my citrus, things like that. Now, if it's native plants, then I'm not going to have to do that. You know, that's another ball game. But with these plants that I really want to, you know, take off, then I'm going to add the organic fertilizer at time of planting.
Okay. How often is it okay for new less than 1 year trees this season? I'm not quite understanding. How often it's okay to water for less than 1 year trees? What about the season? Is it the same watering as always?
So when we have new trees, specifically trees, it is, and this will also go for large shrubs, like shrubs that are really going to be like, you know, I'd say 5 feet, 6 feet and bigger. We really want to take the time to establish good, healthy root systems. And we do that by, of course, the root system is fairly small at the beginning, whatever size the container is. We want to make sure we've scored those roots if it was bound. We want to really encourage those root systems to start to grow out. When we use the organic fertilizer, a lot of times our organic fertilizers have the mycorrhizal fungi, which is going to help those root systems extend and grow really strong. We want to make sure we're watering, and every couple weeks, we're going to be watering a little bit more out and a little bit more volume so we can get deeper roots. So remember, it's going to be out and down. So as a tree is growing up this way, we also want to encourage those root systems to go down and wide. And it could take up to 2 years for that tree to become established. Once that tree is established, depending on the variety of the tree, it could very well be no water through the rainy season. You might not be turning the irrigation on that tree or on that line of trees until maybe June or July, when we really have our long daylight hours. We know that that water is really going to be, the water those root system can access is dried up. And then we might be only doing deep watering once a month, twice a month, once a week, depending again on that variety of that tree. So when we're looking at trees, we want to make sure we really understand what is the ideal care that tree is going to need. How much water is it going to need once established? Understand that, understand how the root system grows. Like an oak tree is very different from a redwood tree, is very different from a fruit tree, and so forth. And ask your garden center professionals, read up about it on the Sunset Western Garden Book, do a little research, you'll get the answers.
Okay. Is it okay to set the automatic watering during the middle of the night and very early in the morning? I think you already answered that.
Yeah, it's the best time I prefer to water, and I always set this up for my clients before everyone got into the showers in the morning. So if the family was morning showers before work, I always like to have the irrigation set up before that, so I'm not impacting the water pressure throughout the property. I have a tendency to want to hear my irrigation going off in the morning, so I have it scheduled starting about 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's usually done by 6:37. I just want to know what's happening, and then I can see, because if it's the middle of the night and there's a leak, I can't really, it's just, that's me. But yeah, as long as it's cool, that's the best time to water.
You know, they have some nice flow sensors too, for the irrigation systems that tell you whether.
Oh, yeah. That's what's really neat on these modern controllers, these modern things that I have not had a chance to play with yet, because all of my irrigation stuff is pretty much from the 90s, early 2000s. So I have to get up with the programs.
Well, and Redwood City also has, if you have an automated meter, then, and you sign up for leak notifications, if you have irrigation that doesn't shut off, we'll send you an email and let you know. Or push notification, let you know that you've got a leak.
Yeah.
Okay, so another one. Is there a good resource that describes how long to drip irrigate fruit trees? Great question.
Oh yeah, that is a good question. And I think Dave Wilson Nurseries, that website that I offered at the beginning, he's going to that website is a wealth of information. I would encourage you to check that out. However, I was just doing some online researching today, and I did come across, what I did come across was schedules for fruit trees, schedules for turf. Those are very common. So, just do fruit tree watering needs, or, water. How much do I water my fruit trees, California? And you'll get some articles that'll come up, and I think that'll be helpful.
And then how about watering container gardens? We have both plants in the ground and in pots.
Okay, I'm really glad you asked that question, because that's much different. I haven't talked about that at all. So when we talk about our containers, understand that container is going to, can either stay wet longer or dry out faster. One, depending on what is the container made out of. If it's terracotta, understand that water can wick right out, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you have planted in it. Also understand, we really want to make sure that drainage is happening at the bottom. And I know over time, sometimes the soil kind of builds up and gets clogged. So I would say annually, you want to make sure you're doing some maintenance and get like a chopstick or like a nail and make sure those holes are clear, or really make sure you're seeing it drain the way it needs to drain. Again, I would make sure that I'm watering it thoroughly, and then I'm letting it dry a couple inches, just a couple inches before I water again. But what I've learned is that, and really all potting, okay, so we're always going to use potting soil for containers. We're not going to use, unless it's a large container, then we could use a planting mix. But soils, mediums are very different. And I have had situations where, and which I'm faced with right now, very good quality soil, but it's staying really wet. So my plants are not growing very well because the roots are staying wet. So I have to adjust this. So just make sure things are drying out well. The water's flowing through well. And then you will most likely be watering a little bit more frequently than you would your other plants. This is if you have an irrigation system set up on them. This is where I have a tendency on the really hot days, I'll add extra water. I'll hand water. I'll do spot watering for some things that I think might need it. Smaller plants, smaller pots are going to dry out more quickly than larger containers as well.
Great. Do you know where do you know where I can do a beginning workshop on drip irrigation systems? And I would say, I think we've recorded some seminars, so
yeah.
some workshops.
The Bosqua has some irrigation. You can classes. You can also check out the Urban Farmer Store that's near the zoo in San Francisco. They have had classes in the past. I'm not sure if they're doing online classes right now. I haven't been in touch with those folks for a little bit, unfortunately. Those would be the two resources I would. And then also, depending on what level you're interested in, Quell, QWEL, has free irrigation, free landscape classes. So you could check that out. And they are regional. So they kind of go around the Bay Area. I'm pretty sure they have one down in the peninsula. I know that there is one in the East Bay. There's one up in Napa. So check that out as well.
Right. We were supposed to host one this year,
Awesome.
and we canceled it because of COVID. So.
Yeah, that's a cool class. So
very cool class. It is intense compared to like an hour workshop or 2-hour workshop though. It's I think 4 to 5 weeks. And anyway.
It's really, if you want to dive in deep and really get into the nitty gritty of irrigation. But if you're into it, I say, yes, you want to get in, because if this is gardening's my life. If it's your life, like it's my life, we want to know how to, manage and navigate these irrigation systems, because they're not as complicated as they could be. In fact, I usually tell people, I don't know how to use a microwave, but I know how to use an irrigation clock. Like, I think irrigation controllers are way easier to navigate than microwaves. So just saying.
That's great. What do you think about moisture soil probes? Any suggestions?
I have a tough time with those. I know they're easy for some people, but I want to feel the soil with my fingers. I want to, with a small trowel or a small shovel, I want to move. I want to see what's going on. I think the moisture meters the good ones are expensive, and I'd rather just, get out there and monitor, feel, smell, see, all of that.
I tell my customers big screwdriver and just kind of
yeah, exactly.
How would you approach an older drip system that has multiple zones on one long drip line?
Ooh, that's tough. You might want to consider just redoing it. And since you guys have, Debbie, does that rebate help with the renovating the landscape? Is there any rebates for irrigation renovations?
Not at this time. We don't have anything. I would love that because I think it's necessary. I really think of course, the plant material is one piece of saving water, but the irrigation system is a really big piece of saving water. Yeah. So no, and if he's got a drip system, he's not using that for turf. And so that would be our only rebate, would be the turf rebate, where you convert from that spray to drip. So
I would consider redoing it. Now, that might be a little bit of a task that might seem overwhelming, but to be honest, you could tackle it a little bit. You can do a little online research. I even, there's books like this that, let's see, can I get it lined up? I know we're in this weird zone. Oh, I don't think I can do it. Hold on. I'm going to just, anyway, I don't think I can do it. There's drip irrigation books for home landscaping. This one's through UCIPM, University of California Ag. There's books out there that you can look at, check out at the library. And it's really not complicated. You just have to know a couple things like your water pressure, and you want to understand how much water, then depending on the pressure, how much you can actually release at one time. So, but other than that, it's pretty easy. Yeah, I would encourage you just to redo it. And if you want to then not have it connected to the controller, or if you want to kind of just reduce the irrigation, what's coming off that, like just reduce it to one zone, take advantage of the hose bib timers. I was taking care of a property where I had those timers on multiple hose bibs, and it was a pretty big property, over an acre, that I was actually watering, because I didn't want to get into this irrigation system because the wiring, it wasn't practical for the situation. But they're pretty flexible to work with those irrigation timers. Just a side note I didn't mention is annually we want to check the batteries, make sure the batteries are working on all the controllers, regardless if it's the wired in kind or the remote ones.
Right. And Dig makes solar.
Yeah, those are also really cool too.
What about raccoons? I don't want to track them into my garden.
Yeah, sadly, the raccoons aren't always coming in because of water. They're actually coming in for food. Or if you have a pond, if you have a bird bath, if you've got like a larger water source, they're only going to go for your irrigation if they're desperate, if it's super dry and there's no water around. So make sure we're using those beneficial nematodes to remove any of the soil dwelling larvae, because once they know you've got grubs, they're going to come back year after year, even if you've eradicated it. They're smart and they remember. You want to use those barriers, prevent them from getting into the areas that you don't want them to get, and make sure those areas are secure. Those barriers are secure because they're smart. Other than that, sadly, we have to kind of live with these urban critters that are problems.
And then Jennifer says, thank you. This was great.
You're so welcome, Jennifer. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate.
And are the presentation slides available? Yes, they will be. And I think it takes a couple of days for them to get them posted on the Bosca website, but where you registered, just go to, bosca.org, BAWSCA.org, and they should be there. And is Miracle Grow okay to use?
I'm sorry to say that it is not. So but that's not true. I'm going to take that back. Miracle Grow now makes Performance Organics, which is an OMRI certified water soluble liquid that actually is getting amazing consumer feedback. It's great. And you can buy it at your box store. You can buy it at the hardware store. But what I want to share, the reason why the organic fertilizer, the synthetic fertilizers, any of the fertilizers that might turn green or blue when you add water to them, or any of the like 16, 16, 16s, those 10, 10, 10s, those fertilizers with the bigger numbers, they are high in salts. Okay, that's number one. And we know that salt is detrimental to our soil. It also impacts, the water, the soil, how the plants absorb water. And so that's the number one reason why we don't want to use the synthetic fertilizers. When we're overusing them or the salts build up, the plants really start to kind of go downhill. Not sustainable. Okay for those color bowls or those flowering like window boxes that we're changing out all the time, because after some time the plants start to look kind of crummy anyway and we're getting rid of them. But really, I've been using organic fertilizers for over 25 years for clients and very fussy clients, and I've always had amazing results. So if you've got your synthetic fertilizers, go ahead and use them up. But what we want to do is really get on the organic fertilizers, because it's going to feed your plants a more natural, sustainable way. It's not going to impact our waterways. It's not going to pollute our waterways, because what happens is those synthetic fertilizers, the plant can only take so much of that food, and those high numbers. So most of that fertilizer just gets leached into the groundwater or gets into our stormwater somehow, and that's just a bad situation. So just try to work with organic fertilizers. Yeah, I can't say enough about that. Sorry.
It's okay. Can you recommend a specific netting for fruit trees? Any tricks on how to put it on the mature trees?
Yeah, so it depends. Okay, the netting, this one's funny. It depends on what you're trying to keep out. So if it's birds, you can get bird netting. If it's something like the fruit fly that gets in the cherries, you're going to need to get very, very fine netting, smaller netting than mosquito netting. And that, if that's the case, please email me later. And I only know a couple of resources that you can buy that. If the tree is small, and here's the deal, if you the modern way of growing fruit trees or having a backyard orchard, fruit orchard, is to have trees that are small, trees that we can actually hand pick the fruit or get on a very short ladder to use for pruning. If that is the case, then it's very easy to get a couple tea stakes, put it around that tree, and then to actually get your netting to go over, drape over the tea stakes, could go over the tree some, and then you can actually attach it to the ground. Of course, there'll be a way that you can get in to access, but it'll be a little easier. You can, some people frame out, make a frame, and they actually have, you know, poultry wire or 1/2-inch hardware cloth. That's a little excessive, but when you're fed up with the squirrels getting your fruit or the birds getting your fruit, you take drastic measures. I don't think it's so drastic, and actually it's quite cost effective over time. If you are working with netting can be a real pain because it's really hard to work with. It kind of, your fingers get into it and it turns into a knot very easily. So a trick I've learned is I'll get a dowel, like a closet, a rod. Like you go to the hardware store, get one of those wooden rods that's used for the closet, or, you know, even a bar for the shower. And I roll my netting on that, and it saves me so much headache. It makes it a little easier. So it is a pain. I'm not going to lie. It's a pain. If it is just birds and you don't want to deal with the netting, that metallic tape, you know, or like CDs, that works really well, believe it or not. I've got people in my life, one, my husband, who was very skeptical when the birds were getting his favorite peaches. And I was like, let's put the bird tape up. And he's like, it's not going to work. Well, guess what? It worked. So you just got to put a lot out, and you got to make sure it, you know, because it blows in the wind and the birds get freaked out by it.
Well, great tip.
Yeah.
When is the best time to fertilize for different plants?
The best time to fertilize for different plants is typically during their dormant season. So right before they break dormancy. So for instance, roses, I'm going to fertilize when I'm pruning them. And that's typically around January, maybe the beginning of February, if they haven't broke dormant season yet. My fruit trees, I'm going to, it's a little different. I'm going to fertilize them in the fall or early winter when they've dropped their leaves, or right before they've dropped their leaves. I'm going to actually put the good quality organic dry fertilizer around the drip line. I'm going to get some chicken manure. I'm going to rake that around on top of that fertilizer, and then I'm going to pile that up with mulch on top of that. And that's going to let the whole rainy season just kind of work its magic in that mulch. Perennials, flowering perennials, I would normally fertilize again right after the flowering season or right before they're breaking dormancy. So if it's an evergreen, then maybe after its flowering season. But if it's something that goes dormant, that dies back all the way, maybe right before it breaks dormancy.
I was told once that the fir bark mulch has preservatives added.
I'm not familiar with that. I'm sorry to say. You could check with the resource, so the supplier. So again, if you're buying it in bulk, like at a landscape supply similar to Link, so you can ask them. If you're buying it by the bag, on the back of the bag, and this goes for all bag material, if it's compost, if it's potting soil, if it's mulch, it's going to list the ingredients. If you're still a little skeptical, you can, the brand, the company that's manufacturing that or bagging that material, you can look at their website. You can even call them up.
It's 8:24. How many more questions would you like to take?
Oh, I'll keep going if there's more questions.
Okay, there's more questions. How many times do we schedule to water our garden in different seasons? Spring, summer, fall, and for how long? 2 times or 3 times a week or something else?
Yeah, so that's going to vary depending on your garden, depending on the type of soil that you have, if it's clay loam, it's going to hold more water than if it's sandy or sandy loam. It might dry out a little faster. Using mulch is certainly going to reduce that evaporation rate. It's going to keep the soil moist for a longer period of time. If we've got shade, afternoon shade at anywhere in the garden, that's going to also reduce that that evaporation rate. So again, we're going to have to look and feel the soil, and that's going to let you know. I just recently increased the days on my garden. One perennial bed is every other day now. It was 3 days a week for this last month. I just upped it to every other day because it's drying out really fast, but I've got sandy loam. But prior to last month, I only had it on for once a week. So you really kind of have to go with the seasons, go with what's going on. And yeah. So sorry, it varies, and you have to kind of dial that in for yourself.
Yeah, that's where the ET Water Gnome site or the Ratio controllers are super helpful because it's complicated.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on degree granting programs on general gardening, organic food production in the Bay Area? Less interested in landscape design, hardscape. Any comment on any online programs, regardless of Bay Area, e.g., U.S. universities, community colleges, etc.?
Who's asking that question? Do you have their name?
No, anonymous attendee.
If you're still here, could you please email me later? I'm going to have to think about that because yes, there are some classes. There's some good internships I know down in the Santa Barbara area. I also know, and I also want to ask a couple more specific questions, but there are some really good courses. I know like the Occidental Arts and Ecology, amazing classes out there. Merritt College has an amazing horticulture department. Foothill, San Francisco City College, I'm an alum of that horticulture department, so I'm going to give it a shout out. But I'll say Foothill and Merritt are very, very good. But I'm just curious a little bit more like what, if you're looking for more kind of farming or if you're looking for more just general landscaping. So if you don't mind emailing me, I can get you something more specific.
And this question, I believe you already answered, netting to prevent squirrels getting fruit.
Yeah. I will share that squirrels are really smart and crafty. And if there's that's why those exclusion baskets I showed you, because they just give you a little bit more support. But yeah, squirrels are a challenge.
Okay. And we have a passion fruit vine, productive last year. This year it has grown larger. We did manual pollination for a lot of flowers, but sadly the flowers all fell down. We wonder if it is because of the overwatering.
Oh, it could be. Number one way to kill plants is to overwater them. I didn't mention that earlier. We really want to make sure that, especially established vine like that, you're going to want to let it dry out between watering. And it doesn't have to be bone dry, but we really want to find that nice balance point where we're able to let it dry right before, a day or two before bone dry. So, and, these plants, especially like the Mediterranean native plants, they really want to get dried out. Now, passion vine is more of a tropical or subtropical. I think it's native down to South America, things like that. But again, they've acclimated to our area. We really want to let things dry out between watering, because when they stay too wet, they get stressed, and then that's when we see these problems.
Mm-hmm. There are holes formed in the soil around the root of the fruit trees. Is that normal?
Holes. Well, that could be voles. If it's just clean holes, it could be voles. Those are like little field mice. Mm-hmm. If they're little mounds with a hole, or like maybe it could be gophers. So that's where I would encourage you to check out the UCIPM website to do proper pest identification. And from there, they can you'll see some management for either of those. If the holes have been there for a long time and you don't see any activity, like you don't see voles or anything like that, then it could be abandoned. Tunneling systems, maybe a gopher snake came in and took care of them, or maybe a raptor. But that's typically from some type of activity like that. And that's if the holes are, if we're talking about holes that are like about the size of maybe an inch, inch and a half wide diameter. If it's smaller holes, maybe it's beetles, it could be the night crawlers, things like that.
Okay. And then lastly, our anonymous attendee will email you directly.
Okay, great. Great.
And a thanks. And there was quite a few thanks and great presentation. So
thank you. Thank you.
That was the last one.
Oh, that was great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining again. And I just love everyone's enthusiasm and their curiosity to learn more about all of this. And I hope that everyone really is walking away with some good information to help support you in your garden throughout the summer months. So thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much, Suzanne. This is a great presentation. And every spring and every fall, Bosca holds presentations, landscaping presentations. They're free. We have excellent presenters such as Suzanne. So I encourage everyone to join us. It may continue to be Zoom type presentations, or you know, and actually live presentations. So in the spring or in the coming fall. So we'll see what happens. I don't think anybody knows just yet, but anyway, thank you so much, and good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care. So end the presentation.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Okay, stop recording.